The problem with revenge, Isolde Winters would later reflect, is that you spend so long imagining the moment of impact, the shock in their eyes, the collapse of their carefully constructed lies, that you forget to plan for what comes after. The hollow space where rage used to live. The strange, cold silence of a war finally won. But that reckoning was still 5 years away. Right now, in the suffocating present of March 2019, she was just a girl trying not to cry in a restaurant bathroom, staring at her reflection and wondering how she'd become so small. The mirror showed her the truth: 23-years-old cardigan from Goodwill with a button-missing jeans that had seen better days 3 years ago, mascara threatening to betray her. Behind her, the muffled sounds of Bella Notte, continued silverware on porcelain, the murmur of people who could afford $40 entrees without checking their bank account. First, the acoustic guitar player nobody was listening to. Isolde pressed her palms against the marble sink. Cold. Real. She'd walked into this restaurant 2 hours ago thinking tonight might change her life. It had just not the way she'd imagined. The text message was still burned into her retinas. She'd been looking for a charger cable in Dryden's laptop bag that morning. He'd left it at her apartment, the one she paid 70% of the rent for despite working 3 jobs to his one, and his phone had lit up with a notification. See, can't wait till Sunday. 3 years of watching you play house with that anchor is finally over. You're my real future baby. Dryden, dumping her tonight. She suspects nothing. See you at the airport Monday. Let's celebrate in Napa properly. The reply, timestamp 11 minutes ago. While Isolde had been sitting across from him watching him text, important client, under the table smiling at his lie, because she'd trained herself to see the best in him. She'd taken a screenshot, sent it to herself, deleted the evidence from his message thread, then excused herself to the bathroom before her face could give her away. Now staring at this stranger in the mirror, this woman who'd spent 3 years shrinking herself to fit into Dryden Hale's vision of acceptable Isolde, made a choice. She wouldn't confront him. She wouldn't scream or throw wine or make a scene. She would sit back down, smile, and let him say whatever cruelty he'd rehearsed. She would take it, absorb it, let it fossilize into something harder than bone, because the girl staring back at her was already dead. She just didn't know how dangerous her ghost would become. The calamari had gone cold by the time Isolde returned to the table. Congealed grease pooled around the breading little white islands of shame. Dryden hadn't touched his. He'd been too busy texting, thumb-swiping, with the practiced rhythm of a man who'd had this conversation before, probably with other women he'd outgrown. He looked up when she sat, not immediately. He finished his message, first hit send with a flourish, then set the phone face down on the white tablecloth. The blue light from the screen had carved his features into something sharp and unfamiliar. Or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time. Dryden Hale at 25, 6 feet tall, CrossFit lean jaw that looked good in the LinkedIn photos he updated quarterly. He wore ambition like cologne expensive, overwhelming, designed to fill a room before he did. Tonight it was Tom Ford, the blazer she'd helped him pick out last year, when he'd maxed out his Amex trying to look like the senior executives who wouldn't promote him. She'd told him it made him look powerful. She'd meant it then. Sorry about that. His voice carried the particular timbre of someone who wasn't sorry at all. Smooth, rehearsed. The same tone he used with clients when he was about to upsell them on services they didn't need. Isolde reached for her water. The glass was slippery with condensation. She wrapped both hands around it to keep them from shaking. Big deal. The words came out steadier than she felt. Dryden picked up his wine, a Pinot Noir he'd spent 10 minutes explaining to the waiter, lecturing him on terroir and oak aging, while Isolde had watched the poor man's smile calcify into politeness. He swirled it now, watching the legs form on the glass with an expression that suggested he found the Burgundy more interesting than anything she might say. The Peterson account, closed it this afternoon. He took a sip, nodded to himself in satisfaction. Isolde wondered if he was tasting the wine or his own success. 6-figure contract, puts me in striking distance for VP. That's amazing, Dryden. Really? She meant to sound enthusiastic. It came out hollow. He must have heard it too, because his eyes finally focused on her with something like attention. Not affection, attention. The way you might look at a problem you are about to solve. We need to talk. 4 words. Isolde felt them land like stones in her chest. This was it. The moment he'd been building toward all night, maybe all week. She thought about the screenshot on her phone, the evidence she could throw in his face right now, watch him scramble for excuses. But something stopped her, pride maybe, or the curious detachment that comes from watching your life collapse in slow motion, clinical and dreamlike. She set her softer down, folded her hands in her lap, waited. Dryden leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over the back in a posture of casual dominance. He'd practiced this, Isolde realized. Rehearsed it in the mirror, maybe? Or workshopped it with Callista over late-night calls while Isolde had been at her evening shift pulling espresso shots for students who tipped in quarters. I think you know where this is going. He paused, waiting for her to fill the silence. When she didn't, he continued. The script was already written. He just needed to deliver his lines. These last 3 years, they've been great. Really. You were exactly what I needed when I was getting started. Supportive. Understanding. You helped me get my foot in the door. Past tense. Every verb a nail in a coffin. But I'm in a different place now. Professionally, personally, I'm ascending Isolde. That Peterson deal. It's just the beginning. 2 years, maybe 18 months, I'm looking at VP corner office. The whole trajectory is finally clicking into place. He said trajectory the way other men said destiny. Like it was something cosmically ordained rather than a corporate ladder he was climbing over the backs of people dumb enough to trust him. Isolde's throat was tight. She forced herself to swallow, to breathe, to keep her face neutral while he dismantled their relationship with the same efficient brutality he probably used to fire underperforming team members. And I need a partner who reflects that trajectory. Dryden leaned forward now, elbows on the table, hands steepled in what she recognized as his sincere businessman pose. He used it in meetings when he was about to tell clients something they didn't want to hear. Someone who can walk into a room and command attention. Someone with pedigree, who understands the world I'm moving into. The word hung between them like an indictment. Pedigree. As if she were a rescue dog he was returning to the shelter because it didn't match his furniture. Isolde felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her heart that had been breaking slowly for months, death by 1,000 small dismissals. This was something else, something deeper. The foundation she'd built her sense of self upon fracturing into new fault lines. You're breaking up with me. She said it flatly. A statement, not a question. Dryden had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. It passed quickly, smoothed over by the absolute certainty of someone who'd already made peace with their decision and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. I'm being honest with you. That's more than most people get. He picked up his wine again, took another sip. Dutch courage or just thirst, Isolde couldn't tell. Look, let's be real here. You're stagnant. You've been finding yourself as an artist for 3 years, and what do you have to show for it? A few paintings nobody wants to buy. A job at a gallery that pays minimum wage. You're still waitressing, for God's sake. Still making coffee for college kids. Each observation was technically accurate. Each one felt like a slap. You have no ambition. Dryden was warming to his theme now the way he did when he sensed weakness, going in for the kill. You're happy being a starving artist, living in the same cramped apartment, wearing the same thrift store clothes, dreaming the same small dreams. You're an anchor, Isolde, and I'm a rocket. The metaphor was clumsy, mixed, deeply unkind. He delivered it like poetry. I'm struggling, Isolde heard herself say. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. There's a difference between struggling and being stagnant. The gallery cut my hours, the economy. To the world there isn't. Dryden cut her off with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never had to choose between groceries and electricity. Perception is reality in my world. And the reality is I need someone who elevates me, not someone I have to carry. Isolde thought about the cover letter she'd written for him 3 years ago, the one that got him the interview at Hale Logistics. The hours she'd spent editing his presentations, proofreading his emails, listening to him practice pitches, while she'd nodded encouragement on 4 hours of sleep. The suit hanging in his closet right now, the one she'd bought him with tip money, saved over 2 months because he'd needed to look the part for his first big client meeting. Carrying. He'd said carrying. I need someone who knows the difference between a Gulf Stream and a Cessna without having to Google it, Dryden continued. He was on a roll now, 3 glasses of wine deep, and finally saying all the things he'd been thinking for months, maybe years. Someone whose father doesn't work at a hardware store. Someone who's been to Europe for reasons other than studying abroad. Someone who gets it. The snobbery was breathtaking. Isolde's father had worked at that hardware store for 30 years, putting her through state school with the employee discount and weekend overtime. He taught her how to fix a carburetor, how to read a blueprint, how to see the hidden architecture in systems most people took for granted. That gift, the ability to see patterns, to understand how things connected, was the only thing that had kept her afloat these last few years. But Dryden had never noticed. He'd been too busy looking down. Who? The question slipped out before Isolde could stop it. She hadn't meant to ask, hadn't meant to give him the satisfaction of knowing she cared. Dryden's smile was thin, satisfied. He'd been waiting for this. Callista Noir. We've been seeing each other for a few months. Her father owns the Noir vineyards in Sonoma. Maybe you've heard of them. Old money, real estate portfolio across California. She went to Stanford, spent a year in Paris. She's moving into the apartment on Sunday, actually. I was going to ask you to have your things out by Friday, if that's not too much trouble. The precision of the cruelty took Isolde's breath away. He'd timed it, planned the logistics of her displacement with the same efficiency he brought to his precious Peterson account. 48 hours to pack up 3 years of her life and find somewhere else to sleep. Somewhere she could afford on the $1,100 a month she made between 3 part-time jobs in a city where studio apartments started at $1,800. Friday, Isolde repeated. The word felt like sand in her mouth. I think it's for the best. Clean break. Fresh start. Dryden signaled the waiter with an imperious wave. And Isolde, I'm not paying for your dinner. Consider it a lesson in self-sufficiency. You should probably figure out how to take care of yourself before you try to be someone's partner. He stood up, buttoning his blazer with the self-satisfied air of a man who just closed another deal. He pulled out his wallet, the leather one she'd given him last Christmas, monogrammed, purchased with money she couldn't spare, and dropped his credit card on the table. I'll get mine. You handle yours. Oh, and the apartment key. Leave it on the counter when you go. I'm having the locks changed on Saturday anyway, but it's the principle of the thing. He walked out, didn't look back, didn't pause to see if she was okay, if she had a way to pay for the meal he'd ordered, if she had anywhere to go. Just threaded through the restaurant with his phone already out, probably texting Callista that it was done. The dead weight had been cut loose. They could stop hiding now. Isolde sat alone at the table. The acoustic guitarist had moved on to a cover of Hallelujah, which felt obscenely on the nose. Around her, other couples laughed and clinked glasses and fed each other bites of tiramisu. A normal Thursday night at Bella Notte for everyone except her. She looked at the bill, $83. She had $42 in her checking account. Another $20 in her wallet emergency cash she'd been saving for her phone bill. The math was simple and devastating. The waiter appeared at her elbow. An older man, late 60s maybe, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too many first dates gone wrong, too many breakups conducted over cooling pasta. Miss, are you all right? Isolde looked up at him. His name tag said Giovanni. Underneath in smaller letters, owner/manager. She tried to smile, failed, settled for not crying. I'm $40 short. The words should have been humiliating. Somehow saying them out loud to this stranger felt like the first honest thing she'd said all night. Giovanni pulled out the chair Dryden had vacated, sat down without invitation, a small act of rebellion against restaurant protocol. He folded his hands on the table, looked at her with an expression that managed to be both sympathetic and matter-of-fact. That man who just left, he is not a good man. It wasn't a question. Isolde almost laughed, almost cried. Did neither. He's successful. Successful at being cruel, yes. Giovanni's accent was Italian, softened by decades in America, but still present in the cadence of his words. I have been in this business 40 years, signorina. I have seen every kind of person. The ones who tip well and treat the staff badly, the ones who propose marriage over dessert and serve divorce papers over breakfast. That man, he will be rich perhaps, he will be important maybe, but he will never be happy because he does not know the difference between value and price. Isolde felt something warm and dangerous building behind her eyes. She blinked it back. Not here. Not yet. I can't pay for all of this. Then you will pay what you can, and I will consider the rest a gift. Giovanni stood, picked up the bill. No arguments. You will need that $40 more than I need the satisfaction of following policy. But Signorina, may I tell you a story? Isolde nodded. What else was there to do? I came to America in 1985. I had $50 in my pocket and a recipe for my grandmother's ragu. I slept in my car for 3 months. Ate bread and olives I stole from restaurant dumpsters. Washed dishes for men who called me names I will not repeat. And every night, every single night, I told myself they do not see me. They do not see what I will become. He gestured around the restaurant, the white tablecloths, the wine racks glowing amber in recessed lighting, the original art on the walls, the fresh flowers, the customers who didn't flinch at triple-digit checks. Now, I own 3 restaurants. My children went to university. My wife drives a Mercedes she picked out herself. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes the men who called me names, they come here. They make reservations. They wait at the bar for a table. And they do not recognize me. But I recognize them. Giovanni smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd won a very long game. The people who underestimate you, Signorina, they are not your burden. They are your fuel. You will burn them for warmth while you build something they cannot even imagine. But first you must stop crying, stop apologizing, stop making yourself small for men who would not notice if you disappeared. He pulled a 20 from his own wallet, set it on the table. Go home, pack your things, sleep somewhere safe even if it is uncomfortable. And tomorrow you begin, not for him, not to prove anything to him, for you, because you deserve a life bigger than his small imagination. Giovanni left the 20 and the bill, walked back to the hostess stand where a young couple was waiting to be seated. Isolde watched him smile at them, warm and professional, as if he hadn't just dismantled and rebuilt her entire worldview in the space of 5 minutes. She picked up the 20, added her own, left it on the table with the bill. In the bathroom, one more time, she washed her face. The mascara came off in black rivers. Underneath her eyes were red but clear. She looked at her reflection, really looked the way you might study a stranger, and made a promise to the girl staring back. You are done being an anchor. You are done being dead weight. You are done shrinking. The girl in the mirror didn't smile, but she nodded. Once, an agreement between selves. Isolde walked out of Bella Notte into the cold March night. She had nowhere to sleep. $42 in the bank, a phone bill due Tuesday, 3 jobs that barely covered rent she no longer had to pay, and a screenshot of text messages that proved the man she'd loved was exactly as cruel as he'd just demonstrated. She pulled out her phone, opened Reddit, found the logistics forum she lurked in, sometimes the one where industry professionals posted puzzle problems for fun. There was a thread from 3 days ago still unsolved, a shipping nightmare out of Singapore, 7 ports, conflicting tariffs, union strikes, weather delays. The OP had offered $5,000 to anyone who could optimize the route to meet the deadline. 47 comments, all of them wrong. Isolde looked at the problem, really looked, saw the pattern underneath the chaos, the hidden architecture that everyone else had missed because they were too focused on the obvious constraints. She saw the solution in 3 dimensions, the way her father had taught her to see problems not as obstacles, but as puzzles waiting for the right sequence. She typed for 7 minutes straight, showed her work, explained not just the answer, but the underlying logic, the reason it worked when nothing else could. She hit post, closed the app, started walking toward the gallery where she worked, where there was a storage closet with a space heater and a door that locked from the inside. By the time she got there, her phone was buzzing. A direct message from the OP Singapore, shipping, holy shit. You just saved my company $200,000 in penalties. Who are you? Can we hire you? Isolde looked at the message, at the offer embedded in those questions, at the door opening in a wall she thought was solid. She typed back, nobody. Yet. Then she turned off her phone, curled up on the floor of the storage closet with her coat as a blanket, and fell asleep. Not crying, not thinking about Dryden or Callista or the apartment she wouldn't be returning to. Just sleeping, dreamless and cold and strangely unexpectedly free. The girl who cried was dead. What crawled out of that storage closet 3 hours later, stiff and hungry and absolutely certain, was something else entirely. Something patient, something calculating, something that would build an empire out of spite and precision and the kind of rage that burns cold for years. But first, she had to disappear. The gallery fired her on Friday, not for sleeping in the storage closet, though the manager had left a note suggesting Isolde might want to seek resources for her situation, but because spring enrollment was down and they needed to cut costs. Last hired, first fired. She got the news via email while sitting in a Starbucks using their Wi-Fi to email her other two jobs about picking up extra shifts. The coffee shop said no. The restaurant said maybe. Neither said yes. Isolde had 72 hours before Dryden expected her out of the apartment. She'd spent Friday sleeping at the gallery before they'd locked her out. Saturday, she'd have to find somewhere else. The YMCA had a shelter program, but there was a wait list. Her mother lived 3 states away in a house too small for unexpected guests. Her father had remarried, started a new family. She could call, could ask, could accept the particular humiliation of admitting that Dryden had been right about her failure to launch. Or she could solve the problem herself. Saturday morning, Isolde returned to the apartment with garbage bags and grim determination. Dryden was gone off with Callista for the weekend, according to his Instagram story. Photos of wine tastings and infinity pools and her Callista, all long legs and practiced laughter. The caption, "New chapters with the right people." Isolde packed quickly, clothes, books, the few pieces of art she'd managed not to sell when money got tight, her laptop, 4 years old and running on spite. She left behind anything he'd ever paid for the coffee maker, the nice sheets, the kitchen utensils. Left behind the framed photo of them at his company retreat, both of them smiling like people who believed in forever. She took it out of the frame, ripped it in half, left his side on the counter next to the apartment key. Her side she folded and put in her wallet. A reminder. Evidence. Someday she'd look at this girl and not recognize her. But she needed to remember what it felt like to be her just for a little while. Needed to keep the wound fresh enough to feel what came next. The storage unit cost $89 a month for a 5x5. She paid 3 months up front with the last of her savings, stacked her bags inside, took 1 change of clothes and her laptop. Everything else could wait. Everything else was just wait. She slept in her car Saturday night, a 2004 Honda Civic with 200,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on since 2015. It was parked on a residential street in a neighborhood nice enough that cops wouldn't hassle her, but cheap enough that no one would notice another beater taking up space. She cracked the windows, locked the doors, and pulled her coat over her head. It smelled like the thrift store it came from, like other people's lives and choices. By morning, it would smell like her. Sunday, the Reddit message changed everything. Singapore shipping, serious offer. We need a logistics consultant for our Pacific routes. 6-month contract, remote work, $5,000 per month, plus bonuses for efficiency savings. You interested? Isolde read the message 3 times. $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year, more than she'd made in total last year from all 3 jobs combined. Enough to rent a room somewhere. Enough to eat something other than ramen and day-old bakery discounts. Enough to stop sleeping in her car. She wrote back, yes. When do I start? The answer came within an hour now. First project attached. Payment on completion. The file was labeled Rotterdam Crisis. Isolde opened it in the parking lot of a McDonald's using their Wi-Fi and a lukewarm coffee she'd stretched across 3 hours. The problem was a masterpiece of cascading failures, port strike weather delays, container shortages, customs holdups. A shipment of medical supplies needed to reach Rotterdam in 11 days, or the client faced 7-figure penalties. Traditional routing was 15 days minimum. Everyone else who'd attempted the problem had tried to shave time off the existing routes. Isolde saw something different. She saw the gaps between the routes, the spaces where unconventional solutions lived. Smaller ports, split shipments, multimodal transfers that violated industry conventions but didn't violate any actual regulations. She saw the answer the way her father had taught her to see machines, not as they were, but as they could be if you were willing to ignore what everyone else assumed was impossible. She worked for 14 hours straight, forgot to eat, forgot to sleep. Built the solution in a spreadsheet so detailed it included weather patterns, union schedules, backup routes for every contingency. When she finally hit send, it was 3 a.m. Monday morning. She was shaking with exhaustion and caffeine, and the electric certainty that she just solved something unsolvable. The reply came at dawn. "This is brilliant, actually brilliant. You just made me look like a genius to my board. Check your PayPal." Isolde checked. $5,000. Posted, real, hers. She sat in her car and cried. Not sad crying, not relief crying, something else. The tears of someone who just discovered they had a weapon they hadn't known how to use. She spent the next 6 months living like a ghost. Rented a room in a house with 4 other people that strangers who worked nights and kept to themselves. Bought a gym membership for $20 a month, used it for showers and Wi-Fi, and a place to sit that wasn't her car. Quit the restaurant job when the logistics work started coming in steadily. Not through official channels, but through word of mouth, dark web forums, encrypted Telegram chats where corporations posted problems they needed fixed quietly. She became known as the Phantom. No face, no identity, just results. A username attached to solutions nobody else could find. By month 6, she was making $15,000 a month. By month 1230. She moved into a studio apartment, bought a real bed, opened a business bank account under a shell, LLC. Taught herself Python and SQL through YouTube videos and late-night coding sessions. Learned corporate logistics from the inside, studying how Fortune 500 companies moved goods and money and data across borders. By 18 months, she'd spotted the real opportunity, the software. Every company she consulted for used different platforms. All of them clunky, all of them expensive, none of them actually good. They were built by programmers who didn't understand logistics and logistics experts who didn't understand programming. But Isolde understood both. She saw the system that could exist, the algorithm that could optimize routing in real time, adapt to disruptions, learn from patterns. She called it Orion. Spent 8 months building it alone, coding 16 hours a day, testing it on her own contracts, refining until it worked not just well, but perfectly. Then she licensed it, not to one company, to all of them. Subscription model tiered pricing contracts written by lawyers. She paid $500 an hour to make ironclad. The first year, Orion made $2 million. The second year, $20 million. By year 3, she had 70% of the Fortune 500 using her software. By year 4, she had competitors trying to poach her code and venture capitalists trying to buy her company. She told them all the same thing: no. She'd built this alone. She'd own it alone. Every dollar was hers. Every line of code was hers. Every single percentage point of equity stayed exactly where it was in her control. She hired carefully. Captain Thorne first found through a friend of a friend who knew she needed someone to fly her to meetings when commercial got too risky. Thorne had been ex-SAS dishonorably discharged for reasons he didn't discuss and she didn't ask about. He was competent, discreet, and loyal in the way that only people who'd been cast out understood. She paid him well. He asked no questions. Desmond Gray came next. XMI6 burned by his own agency when a political appointment had needed a scapegoat. He'd been working private security for oligarchs when Isolde had found him bored and brilliant and wasting his gifts on babysitting assets. She'd offered him a job doing what he did best: information. Strategy, seeing 3 moves ahead. He'd said yes before she'd finished the pitch. They became her inner circle. Not friends. Isolde had learned not to confuse loyalty with affection, but something better. Allies. People who understood that the world was not fair, would never be fair, and the only rational response was to build your own kingdom where you made the rules. By year 5, she disappeared entirely. No social media, no public photos, no interviews. Just the company IW Holdings, just the reputation, the architect. A ghost who fixed the unfixable, a name whispered in boardrooms when supply chains collapsed and CEOs needed miracles. And she was worth, according to the private valuation Desmond had commissioned from a discreet firm in Luxembourg, $2.3 billion. With a B. Made entirely from nothing. From a storage closet, in a car, and a promise she'd made to a girl in a mirror 5 years ago. Isolde Winters, at 28, owned a penthouse in London, another in Manhattan, a villa outside Dubai. She had a Gulf Stream G700 that cost $78 million and could cross oceans without refueling. She had art on her walls worth more than Dryden's annual salary. She had tailored suits from Savile Row and watches she didn't wear, and enough money that she'd stopped checking prices years ago. And she had not thought about Dryden Hale in at least 3 years, had blocked him on everything, had trained herself not to care what he was doing, who he was with, whether he'd noticed that the software his company used bore the signature of the woman he'd called dead weight, until the invitation arrived. It came via courier to her London office. Heavy cream cardstock gold embossing the works. Cedar Ridge High School, class of 2014. 10-year reunion. Sterling Vance Estate, Scottsdale, Arizona. March 15th, 2024. She'd opened it with mild curiosity, the way you might open any piece of junk mail that had managed to find you despite your best efforts at invisibility. And there on the enclosed guest list, a tacky addition clearly designed to bait people into attending. By showing who else was coming, she saw his name. Dryden Hale and Callista Isolde had stared at those names for a long time. Long enough that Desmond had noticed, had asked if everything was all right, had gotten no answer because she didn't have one. She should have thrown it away. Should have sent regrets. Should have remained exactly where she was, invisible, untouchable, focused on the empire that demanded her attention every hour of every day. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Clear my schedule." Desmond had looked up from his tablet, one eyebrow raised. "For what? Next weekend. I have a ghost to bury." And now, 5 years after the worst night of her life, Isolde Winters stood in her closet in London, looking at racks of dresses that cost more than Dryden's car. She selected one vintage Chanel black, simple, elegant. The kind of dress that didn't scream wealth because it didn't have to. The kind of dress worn by women who knew that real power whispered. Captain Thorne had the jet fueled and ready. Desmond had compiled a full dossier on Dryden, his job, his finances, his relationship status. The news was not good for him. Senior VP at Hale Logistics, but the company was struggling. Revenue down 18%. Rumors of accounting irregularities. Dryden himself was leveraged to the eyeballs, $465,000 in debt across mortgages, car loans, credit cards. The Peterson account that had gotten him promoted fraud. Cooked books, fake contracts, promises made to clients that couldn't be kept. It was all about to come crashing down. The lawsuit was already drafted. Henderson Global, the parent company, was just waiting for the right moment to drop the hammer. And Hale Logistics, the company Dryden had given his name and loyalty to, they'd been paying licensing fees for Orion routing software since 2022. $85,000 a year for 3 years, paid directly to IW Holdings, to Isolde. Every single route Dryden had optimized, every efficiency he'd claimed credit for, every success he'd built his fragile VP title on, funded by the woman he'd called an anchor. Isolde had known, of course. Desmond had flagged it when the contract first came through. She'd laughed, told him to process it normally. Let Dryden pay her to make himself obsolete. The irony was too perfect to interrupt. Now, standing in her closet with the invitation in one hand and the black dress in the other, Isolde made a choice. She would go. She would walk into that reunion. She would watch Dryden perform his success for an audience that didn't matter. And then when the moment was right, she would show him what he'd thrown away. Not for revenge. Revenge was loud and graceless and beneath her. No, she would do it for closure. For the girl who'd cried in a bathroom 5 years ago. For every woman who'd ever been called an anchor by a man who couldn't swim. She would do it because she could. Because she'd built a weapon from nothing, from rage and logistics and late nights in a storage closet. And it was time to test how sharp it had become. Isolde looked at her reflection one last time. The girl from the restaurant bathroom was gone completely. In her place stood something else. Someone else. Cold, focused, unbreakable. The architect was going home. Arizona heat was different from London cold. Dry instead of damp, relentless instead of creeping. Isolde felt it the moment she stepped off the commercial flight at Phoenix Sky Harbor. She'd flown first class under a name that wasn't hers, arriving like anyone else, because the weapon wasn't meant to be visible yet. The Gulf Stream waited at a private airfield 40 miles north. Captain Thorne running pre-flight checks, Desmond monitoring communications from a hotel suite downtown. Everything choreographed. Everything timed to the minute. The rental car was anonymous. Black sedan, nothing special, the kind of vehicle that disappeared in traffic. She drove herself to Scottsdale with the windows down, letting the desert air burn away the last traces of hesitation. The invitation sat in her purse next to her phone, which had been vibrating steadily with messages she wasn't reading. Desmond checking in, Thorn confirming coordinates. A few texts from business contacts who didn't know she'd left the continent. The world turned whether she watched it or not. Sterling Vance estate sprawled across 20 acres of red rock and imported grass, the kind of wealth that conquered landscapes instead of adapting to them. Adobe walls, terracotta roofs, a pool that looked like it had been stolen from a resort in Bali. The parking lot was full of cars that screamed insecurity, leased BMWs, financed Audis, the occasional genuine Mercedes belonging to someone who'd actually made it. Isolde parked between a Lexus and a Tesla, both gleaming with the particular shine of people who still believed objects prove worth. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. The black Chanel dress was perfect, simple enough to blend, expensive enough to signal to anyone who knew how to read the signs. Her hair fell in a sleek bob that had cost $800 to cut in a salon where they didn't ask questions. Minimal makeup, no jewelry except the Hermes Apple Watch turned inward so the face was hidden. She looked, she hoped, like someone who'd done okay. Not extraordinary, just okay enough to deflect immediate attention. The girl she'd been 10 years ago would have walked in terrified. The woman she'd become walked in hunting. Music drifted across the lawn from a covered pavilion strung with lights that weren't quite bright enough to be festive. A live band was working through a set list that screamed mid-30s nostalgia songs from their high school years, back when any of them had believed the world was fair or predictable. Tables scattered across the space bar, at one end dance floor nobody was using. Maybe 200 people, all of them performing their best lives for an audience that had stopped caring 10 years ago. Isolde accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and positioned herself at the edge of the pavilion where light met shadow, where she could observe without being observed. Hunting required patience. She'd learned that in 5 years of building an empire, one invisible transaction at a time. She spotted Dryden within 3 minutes. Hard to miss him, really. He'd positioned himself at the center of a cluster of men, all of them holding drinks they didn't need and laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Alpha posturing, the kind of performance that required an audience to validate its existence. Dryden looked older than 30. Stress had carved lines around his eyes that expensive skincare couldn't quite hide. His suit was good Hugo Boss, probably, or maybe Ted Baker, but it fit wrong across the shoulders. Tailored for the body he'd had 6 months ago, not the one he was carrying now. The Rolex on his wrist caught light in a way that seemed too insistent, too eager to be noticed. Next to him, draped on his arm like an accessory that had lost its novelty, was Callista Noir, 26 and already exhausted by the effort of maintaining an illusion. Her dress was Balmain, or a very good knockoff, all sequins and cutouts, in desperation. She scrolled through her phone with the glazed attention of someone who'd checked out of the conversation happening around her. Every few seconds, she'd glance up, smile at nothing, then return to her screen, texting someone who wasn't Dryden. Isolde sipped her water and listened. Closed the Midwest distribution deal last quarter, 7-figure contract, should push us into the top quartile for regional logistics firms, Dryden was saying, volume calibrated to reach beyond his immediate circle, performing success for anyone within earshot. One of the men, balding and uncomfortable in a suit that had seen better days, nodded with the enthusiasm of someone who'd stopped listening. That's great, Dryden. Really great. You always knew how to play the game. It's not about playing. Dryden's voice carried that particular edge of ego pretending to be humble. It's about understanding trajectory, seeing where the market's going before anyone else does, positioning yourself at the intersection of opportunity and execution. He'd been reading business books. Isolde recognized the language, the borrowed wisdom of men who sold certainty to people drowning in doubt. She wondered if he believed his own performance or if he'd gotten lost somewhere in the character he'd created. Callista looked up from her phone long enough to interject, "Babe, I'm getting another drink. Want anything?" Her voice was flat, bored, the tone of someone who'd had this conversation too many times and knew exactly how it ended. Dryden waved her off without looking. "Get me a whiskey. Macallan if they have it. Tell them neat 2 fingers." Callista walked away without acknowledging the instruction. Her heels clicked against the stone patio with the rhythm of someone counting down to escape. As she passed Isolde's position in the shadows, their eyes met for just a second. Recognition flickered, not of identity, but of type. 2 women who'd learned to read the room, to see the performance underneath the performance. Then Callista was gone, phone already back out, typing something urgent to someone who mattered. Isolde waited, watched. the predator letting prey establish patterns before making a move. Dryden was still talking, volume increasing with each drink. The key is diversification. We're not just moving boxes anymore. It's about integrated supply chain solutions, end-to-end logistics management. That's where the real money is. That's what separates companies like Hale Logistics from the warehouse operators who think they're in the same business. Another man in the circle, younger, with the desperate energy of someone still climbing, leaned in. You guys use that Orion software, right? I heard it's revolutionary. Supposed to cut routing time by like 30%. Isolde's grip tightened on her glass. Here it was, the moment she'd been waiting for without knowing she was waiting for it. Dryden's smile stretched wider, sharper. Orion's solid, industry standard now. We were early adopters, got in on the ground floor before the licensing fees went crazy. Smart investment. I pushed for it internally, actually. Recognized the potential before the executive team did. Lies. Every word. Hale Logistics had adopted Orion in 2022, 2 years after it had become standard across the industry. They'd been late, not early. And Dryden hadn't pushed for anything. He'd actively resisted it at first. According to the internal memos Desmond had pulled from a very friendly contact in their IT department. He'd called it expensive and unnecessary, right up until his boss had overruled him, and the efficiency gains had made him look good. But that was Dryden's gift. Taking credit for things he hadn't done, rewriting history in real time, confident that nobody would check the receipts. The younger man nodded, impressed. That's smart. Strategic thinking. You looking to move up from VP? 18 months. Dryden held up 2 fingers like he was taking an oath. Corner office, C-suite, the whole trajectory. It's just a matter of timing now. The board knows what I bring to the table. What he brought to the table, according to Desmond's dossier, was a pending investigation into fraudulent accounting and a lawsuit from Henderson Global that would be filed in 72 hours. But Dryden didn't know that yet. Still thought his careful house of cards would hold because it had held this long. Isolde finished her water, set the glass on a passing tray, stepped out of the shadows and into the light. She moved through the crowd, slowly, deliberately angling her approach so that Dryden would see her peripherally first. Let his brain do the work of recognition, the double-take, the moment of cognitive dissonance when the past collided with the present. It took 6 steps. She watched the process happen in real time across his face, confusion, then recognition, then shock giving way to something uglier. Contempt mixed with curiosity, the look of someone who'd encountered an old problem they'd thought they'd solved. He turned, fully breaking away from his circle. Isolde Winters. Holy shit, is that really you? His voice carried across the pavilion. Several heads turned. The performance was expanding, acquiring new audience members. Dryden thrived on attention the way some people thrived on oxygen. Needed it to feel real. Isolde stopped 3 feet away, close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid the cologne he was wearing, something expensive and overpowering, the olfactory equivalent of his Rolex. Hello, Dryden. It's been a while. Her voice was calm, neutral. The tone of someone running into an old acquaintance at a grocery store, not someone facing the man who'd dismantled her life over cold calamari. Dryden's eyes traveled over her, cataloging, assessing. Looking for the marks of failure, he'd predicted the proof that he'd been right about her trajectory. He found the dress first. His expression flickered as he tried to place the designer and couldn't. Then her posture, which didn't communicate defeat or desperation. Then her face, which had changed in ways he couldn't quite identify. Older, yes, but something else. Something that made him uncomfortable. You look different. He said it like an accusation. 5 years tends to do that. Callista materialized at Dryden's elbow, drinks in hand. She'd taken long enough that Isolde suspected she'd been doing something other than waiting at the bar. Her lipstick was freshly applied. Phone tucked away. Game face restored. Who's this? Callista's tone managed to be both sweet and cutting, the verbal equivalent of a smile with teeth. Dryden accepted his whiskey without thanks. This is Isolde, my ex. The one I told you about, the artist girl who thought she was going to change the world with watercolors or whatever. He'd downgraded her medium. 5 years ago it had been paintings. Now it was watercolors, diminishing further with each retelling. Isolde wondered what version of her existed in his mind by now. Probably stick figures. Callista looked Isolde up and down with the practiced disdain of someone who'd learned to weaponize judgment. Oh, right, the thrift store girl. She laughed high and performative. Dryden showed me your old Facebook photos. That's so authentic, very vintage aesthetic. The insult was almost impressive in its efficiency. 4 sentences to establish hierarchy, condescension, and alliance with Dryden against a shared inferior. Callista had learned from the best. Isolde didn't react, just held Callista's gaze until the other woman looked away, first uncomfortable with the silence where a defense should have been. Dryden stepped closer, emboldened by Callista's presence or the whiskey or just the familiar pleasure of punching down. So what have you been up to, still doing the art thing, or did you finally get a real job? The question was designed to corner her. Either she admitted failure or she claimed success that he could then pick apart. A rhetorical trap that had probably worked on her 5 years ago, when she'd still cared what he thought. I do okay, consulting work mostly. She delivered the line exactly as planned. Vague enough to be dismissive, small enough not to trigger defensiveness. The kind of answer that invited follow-up attacks. Dryden took the bait immediately. Consulting. He drew out the word, tasting the mockery in it. Like life coaching, essential oils, one of those Instagram businesses where you sell overpriced supplements to other desperate people. The men in his circle laughed, not because it was funny, but because Dryden had laughed first and they'd learned that agreement was the price of proximity. Something like that. Callista set her own drink down, warming to the sport. Did you have to GoFundMe the ticket price for tonight? It's $150 per person. That's a lot for someone in, consulting. She said the word with air quotes, physical punctuation of her disdain. Isolde sipped water she no longer had. Let the pause stretch. Watch Dryden's confidence grow with each second of her silence. He was gathering momentum now, playing to his audience, building to the crescendo he'd been rehearsing since he spotted her. He turned to the growing crowd. More people had drifted over, drawn by the spectacle of confrontation like moths to flame. Hey everyone, remember Isolde? From high school, she's the one who thought her finger paintings were going to hang in museums someday. She's here. Let's get her a drink on me. She probably can't afford the open bar tip. The cruelty was casual, practiced, the same tone he'd used 5 years ago, refined by repetition. Isolde watched him perform, watched the crowd react with uncomfortable laughter or averted eyes. Some people were enjoying this, others weren't. Nobody intervened. She stood perfectly still. Let the moment breathe. Let Dryden think he was winning. You haven't changed, she said finally. Quiet, steady. Of course not. Dryden's chest puffed slightly. Why would I change? I'm killing it. Senior VP Porsche Cayenne in the parking lot, penthouse in River North, summer place in the Hamptons. Callista and I are living our best life. He gestured at his girlfriend, who smiled tightly and checked her phone again. What do you have, Isolde? Seriously, what do you have to show for 5 years? The question hung in the air. This was the moment he'd been building toward. The public humiliation. The proof that he'd been right to leave, right to call her dead weight, right to choose someone with pedigree over someone with potential. Isolde felt something shift in her chest, not anger, not even satisfaction, just the cold certainty of someone about to complete a sequence they'd been running for years. I have my dignity. Dryden threw his head back and laughed. The sound was ugly, too loud, the laugh of someone who needed everyone to know they were winning. Dignity. Can you pay rent with dignity? Can you fly first class with dignity? Can you win picked up, not natural win, the kind that came with mechanical force, with turbines spooling up with something large, displacing air? Dryden stopped mid-sentence. Several people looked around confused. The band faltered. Someone at the bar said something about checking the weather app. The wind strengthened. Napkins lifted off tables. Women grabbed at their hair. Men squinted against sudden dust. And underneath the wind, a sound, low, growing, the particular whine of engines that cost more than most houses. Isolde checked her watch. 7:41, right on time. The sound became a roar. Conversations died. The band stopped entirely. Everyone was looking now, searching the darkening sky for the source of noise that was rapidly becoming overwhelming. Lights appeared over the Red Rock Ridge to the east. Not helicopter lights, wrong configuration, wrong intensity. These were landing lights. Commercial grade, impossibly bright. Someone screamed. A woman panicked, certain they were witnessing a crash. Dryden took a step back, instinctively putting distance between himself and whatever was happening. Callista dropped her phone. The aircraft broke over the ridgeline in a blaze of lights and sound. Gulf Stream G700, midnight blue fuselage with a silver stripe running its length like a scar. $78 million of aerospace engineering, making an approach that was technically legal, but profoundly intimidating. Captain Thorne had always had a gift for dramatic entrances. The jet's landing lights turned night into day. Tables shook, glasses toppled. The pool's surface rippled into chaos. The band's drum kit fell over with a crash that nobody heard beneath the roar of engines. Callista shrieked as her carefully styled hair became a wild tangle. Dryden stumbled, spilling whiskey down his suit. Isolde stood unmoving. The wind tore at her dress, but she didn't flinch. Didn't shield her eyes. Just watched the aircraft descend with the critical attention of someone conducting a performance review. A bit aggressive on the approach angle, Thorne, but effective. The G700 touched down on the private airstrip running parallel to the estate, a strip most guests probably hadn't even noticed, hadn't thought to question why a reunion venue had that kind of infrastructure. The aircraft taxied with predatory grace engines whining down from scream to whistle as it came to rest less than 50 yards from the pavilion. Close enough to feel the residual heat radiating from the turbines. Close enough to make everyone profoundly aware of how small they were in comparison. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. 200 people frozen in various states of shock and dishevelment. Someone's champagne flute had shattered. A tablecloth had been torn off its table entirely. The acoustic guitarist was staring at his instrument like he'd forgotten what it was for. Dryden recovered first. Of course he did. His entire personality was built on recovering, quickly, pivoting, finding the angle that let him come out ahead. He straightened his tie with shaking hands, smoothed his hair, manufactured confidence from nothing. Like I said, his voice was too loud compensating. It's the estate owner. I actually mentioned in my email that our reunion was tonight. He probably stopped by to network. These guys at that level, they recognize hustle when they see it. The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. Isolde almost admired it. Almost. Callista grabbed his arm, eyes wide. Dryden, really, you know him? I know of him. Another lie, smoother. And people at that level, they respect drive. Watch this. This is how you network at the executive level. He stepped forward, separating himself from the crowd, preparing to greet whoever emerged from the jet with the confidence of someone who'd convinced himself he belonged in the same airspace as genuine wealth. He glanced back at Isolde, smirking. Take notes, Isolde. This is what success looks like. Maybe if you're lucky, I'll get you an autograph. Isolde didn't respond, just stood exactly where she'd been standing, water glass empty, watching the aircraft door with the patience of someone who'd written the script. The door opened. Hydraulic stairs unfolded with smooth precision, LED runners illuminating each step. For a moment, nothing. Just the hiss of pressurization equalizing and the dying whine of auxiliary power. Then Captain Thorne appeared, 6'4", Navy uniform pressed to razor edges, 4 gold stripes on the epaulets that marked him as command. His face was stone, his posture was military, and his presence was the kind that made people instinctively step back. He descended the stairs with measured steps, boots clicking against metal in perfect rhythm. In his left hand, handcuffed to his wrist, was a brushed steel briefcase. Dryden moved to intercept him at the bottom of the stairs, hand extended, smile wide. Welcome, I'm Dryden Hale. I believe we've corresponded. I'm the one who mentioned our reunion was tonight. I run logistics operations in the Midwest, and I'd love to discuss. Thorne walked through him. Not around, through. His trajectory didn't deviate. Dryden had to jump backward to avoid collision, stumbling into a waiter who dropped an entire tray of glasses. They shattered across stone with a sound like applause. Hey! Dryden's voice cracked with indignation. I'm talking to you. You can't just... Thorne didn't break stride, didn't look back, didn't acknowledge that Dryden had spoken. His eyes scanned the crowd with professional efficiency, searching for a specific target among the chaos of faces. He found her. Locked on. Altered course. Walked directly toward Isolde Winters, standing alone at the edge of the pavilion. Water glass in hand, the only person who didn't look surprised. The crowd parted. People stepped back instinctively, creating a corridor. Thorne closed the distance in 8 precise steps, stopped 3 feet away. Then he snapped his heels together, brought his spine to attention, bowed his head slightly in a gesture that managed to be both military and deeply respectful. "Ma'am?" His voice carried clearly across the silent pavilion. Deep, formal, the tone of someone delivering a report to a superior officer. "My apologies for the intrusion, but we have a code-red situation. Tokyo encryption has been compromised. Mr. Rothschild refuses to proceed without direct authorization from the architect." The words landed like grenades. Isolde watched comprehension ripple through the crowd. Some people didn't understand, others did. A few pulled out their phones immediately, already searching for context. She set her water glass down on a nearby table. The sound of glass on wood was unnaturally loud. "I told Desmond to clear my schedule, Thorne." Her voice was different now, not the quiet neutrality she'd been using. This was command, authority, the voice of someone used to being obeyed without question. Thorne's posture didn't change. "I'm aware, ma'am, but the situation is critical. The board is in emergency session. They won't move without your approval, and Mr. Rothschild is on the secure line in the aircraft. He says the Tokyo merger dies without the architect's direct intervention." Behind Thorne, Dryden was trying to process. His face cycled through confusion to disbelief to something approaching panic. He pushed through the crowd, Callista trailing behind. "Whoa, whoa, whoa." He stepped between Thorne and Isolde, hands up like he was directing traffic. "Okay, very funny. Is this a prank? Did you hire some actor?" "Isolde, come on. Code red the architect." "This is pathetic. The joke's over." He turned to Thorne, tried to make his voice authoritative. "Listen, buddy, I don't know how much she paid you for this little performance, but you need to get back in that plane and boy." Thorne moved. One fluid motion, caught Dryden's wrist, twisted just enough to immobilize without breaking, and shoved him backward. Dryden hit the ground hard, landing on his tailbone in the dirt beyond the patio. "Do not touch the flight crew." Thorne's voice was ice. "And do not interrupt a classified briefing." He turned back to Isolde, dismissed Dryden entirely from his awareness. "Ma'am, we have the satellite uplink ready, but we need to be airborne in 8 minutes to catch the window for Asian markets opening. Do we scrub the mission or execute?" Isolde looked down at Dryden. He was staring up at her from the dirt. His expensive suit ruined his carefully constructed performance, shattered across the desert floor. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. She held his gaze. Let the moment breathe. Let him see the truth before anyone said it aloud. Then she reached out and took the briefcase from Thorne's wrist. The handcuff released with a soft click. She held the case like it weighed nothing, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. "We fly." "Very good, ma'am." Thorne tapped his earpiece. "All stations, this is Thorne. Principal is mobile. Prepare for immediate departure." The crowd erupted. Not applause, shock, confusion. The sound of 200 people trying to recalculate reality in real time. Dryden scrambled to his feet, dirt on his suit, grass in his hair, Rolex scratched. He looked at Isolde like she was a stranger, like she was something that shouldn't exist. "Isolde, wait. Stop. You can't just, who are you sleeping with? Is this some sugar daddy situation you can't afford?" Isolde stopped, turned slowly. The aircraft's strobe lights hit her face at an angle that carved her features into something stark and unforgiving. "I'm not sleeping with the owner, Dryden." She pointed to the tail of the Gulf Stream. The strobe lights illuminated the silver script painted near the registration number. 2 letters. I.W. Isolde Winters. "I am the owner." And the silence that followed was total, complete. The kind of silence that happens when a fundamental assumption about the world breaks and people need time to build a new model from scratch. Dryden shook his head. Denial. Refusal. The only defense left. "No, that's impossible. You paint bad watercolors. You work at a gallery. You live in a storage closet. I did." Isolde's voice was steady, final. "5 years ago, but you were right about one thing, Dryden. You told me I needed to ascend. You told me I was an anchor dragging you down." She took a step closer. The wind from the aircraft's auxiliary power unit whipped her hair back, made her look like something from a dream or a nightmare. "I cut the rope, and I didn't just float. I soared while you were fighting for a VP title And leasing a car you can't afford, I built a logistics empire that controls how your little company ships its boxes. Dryden's face drained of color. Actually drained. Went from red to white in the space between heartbeats. What? Hale Logistics uses Orion routing software. Doesn't it? His mouth moved. No sound, just the shape of words he couldn't form. Industry standard, Isolde continued. Relentless. Precise. Best-in-class routing optimization. You've been using it since, when was it, Thorn? 2022, ma'am. 3 years. 3 years. And every single shipment you process, Dryden, every route you optimize, every efficiency, gain you take credit for in board meetings. She smiled. Not warm, not kind. The smile of a chess player announcing checkmate. You pay me 22 cents per transaction. For 3 years, you've been funding my jet fuel. The math was simple enough that even Dryden's short-circuiting brain could calculate it. Hale Logistics processed thousands of shipments a year, tens of thousands. The licensing fees alone would be $85,000 annually. Isolde provided, reading his expression. Paid directly to IW Holdings, my holding company, every April, like clockwork. Dryden's knees buckled. He caught himself on a table, sending more glasses crashing. Callista had backed away entirely, phone out recording, already calculating how to distance herself from this disaster. Isolde turned to Thorn. Let's go. I have a merger to save. Wait. Callista's voice cracked through the shock. She stepped forward, smiled desperate, all earlier condescension evaporated. Isolde, wait. We were joking. About the dress, it's gorgeous, really chic. In Dryden's company, we're actually looking for new logistics partners. Maybe we could discuss. Isolde didn't even slow down. Started walking toward the aircraft stairs, briefcase in hand, every step measured and certain. But Dryden wasn't done. Couldn't be done. His ego wouldn't allow it. He ran toward her, screaming now, voice raw with something beyond anger. Desperation. The sound of a man watching his life collapse in real time. You own me. I made you. If I hadn't dumped you, you'd be nothing. You'd still be crying in that restaurant. I motivated you. This is my success, mine. He grabbed for the handrail of the aircraft stairs. A security officer materialized. Isolde hadn't even noticed him emerge from the cabin, blocking access with the physical certainty of someone who'd done this work in much worse conditions. Isolde stopped at the top of the stairs, looked down at Dryden. At this man who'd once made her feel smaller than atoms, who'd weaponized her love and turned it into evidence of her inadequacy, who'd called her an anchor and meant it as the worst thing a person could be. From up here, 40 feet above the desert floor with the aircraft lights haloing her silhouette, she looked down at him the way you might look at an insect, briefly, clinically, without malice or attachment. I don't owe you a ride, Dryden, and I certainly don't owe you a conversation. She paused. Let the moment breathe. Let him hear what came next with perfect clarity. From up here, you just look like an ant. Then she turned and walked into the cabin. The door sealed shut with a pressurized thud. Heavy. Final. The sound of a vault closing. Dryden stood at the base of the stairs, reaching towards something he couldn't touch, begging for something that was already gone. The engines began to spool up. Auxiliary power to main turbines. The whine became a roar, became a scream. Everyone scrambled back, except Dryden. He stood there as the jet blast hit him full force. Hot exhaust and desert dust in the downdraft of absolute power. It knocked him backwards, sent him sprawling into the dirt again, buried him in a storm of his own making. The Gulf Stream began to move. Taxied back, turned position for departure. The landing lights swept across the crowd like searchlights, illuminating faces locked in various states of shock. Someone was crying. Someone was laughing. Most were just staring. The aircraft gathered speed, faster than seemed possible for something that large. The nose lifted, wheels left the ground. And then it was climbing, banking hard to the west, running lights blinking against the Arizona sky. Within 30 seconds, it was just another point of light among the stars. Then nothing. Gone. The silence it left behind was different from before. Heavier, permanent. The silence of people who just witnessed something they didn't have words for yet. Something that would take days or weeks to fully process. The demolition of assumed truth. The revelation that the world worked differently than they'd been taught. Dryden lay in the dirt covered in dust. His suit destroyed his Rolex, cracked his entire identity, scattered across the desert floor. Above him, the Arizona sky was vast and indifferent and completely empty of the aircraft that had just ended his life. Inside the cabin, Isolde sat in cream leather that had cost more than Dryden's car. The untouched champagne sat on the table beside her. The satellite phone was ringing. The Tokyo merger awaited. The world has always demanded her attention, but her hands were shaking, just slightly, just enough that she had to fold them in her lap to make them stop. Victory, she was discovering, tasted exactly like Giovanni had warned her 5 years ago in that restaurant. Not sweet, just finished. The cabin pressure stabilized at 41,000 feet. Outside the oval windows, darkness had swallowed Arizona completely, leaving only the distant glow of Phoenix sprawling across the desert like spilled embers. Isolde's ears popped. The champagne in his crystal flute caught the soft amber light, bubbles rising in perfect mathematical progression. She hadn't touched it. Captain Thorne's voice came through the intercom, steady and unbothered by the chaos they'd left behind. "Ma'am, we're established on course. 11 hours, 40 minutes to Tokyo. Weather looks clear across the Pacific." Isolde picked up the handset mounted near her seat. "Thank you, Thorne. That approach was a bit aggressive." A pause, then with the faint trace of amusement. "You said dramatic, ma'am. I delivered dramatic. You delivered theatrical. There's a difference. Noted for next time." She hung up. Next time. As if there would be a next time, as if she'd ever need to orchestrate something like that again. The thought sat heavy in her chest. 5 years of building toward a single moment, and now the moment was over. Sarah appeared from the galley, moving through the cabin with the practiced quiet of someone who'd learned when to be invisible and when to materialize. 28 Ma. To dropout, former trauma surgeon who'd walked away from the ER after watching one too many people die from preventable mistakes. She'd found work as a private flight attendant because it paid better than medicine and required less emotional investment. Isolde had hired her for her discretion and her ability to read situations without needing explanation. "Miss Winters, can I get you anything?" Isolde looked at the champagne, at her reflection in the window. "Do we have anything stronger?" Sarah didn't ask questions. Returned 3 minutes later with a tumbler of Macallan 25 neat, the same whiskey Dryden had ordered 5 years ago, while dismantling her world. The irony wasn't lost on Isolde. She took a sip. The whiskey burned expensive fire tracing down her throat. The satellite phone began to ring. Isolde stared at it, the red light pulsing. Tokyo, the merger, the reason she was supposed to be on this aircraft in the first place. She picked up. "This is Winters. Ms. Winters, Arthur Henderson. I apologize for the emergency call, but we have a situation that requires immediate. I know, encryption compromised, Tokyo merger on hold. Rothschild won't move without me." She cut through his preamble with surgical efficiency. "I was at an event, Arthur. What's the actual crisis?" A pause. Henderson recalibrating. "We have a significant problem with our Midwest operations. The Q3 numbers just came in and they're catastrophic. Revenue down 23%. The Peterson account, our largest contract in that region, has officially terminated. They're threatening legal action." Isolde closed her eyes. She already knew what came next. "Which VP was managing that account?" "Dryden Hale." Henderson's voice carried the disgust of someone who'd been lied to and had believed the lies. "He's been cooking the books for 18 months. Fake efficiency reports, fraudulent satisfaction scores, promises we have no infrastructure to deliver on. They realized we've been routing their shipments through channels that don't exist. And now they want compensation. 2.4 million, plus legal fees, plus a public statement about our systematic failures." Henderson sounded like he was aging in real time. "I'm firing him Monday morning. Security is clearing his desk in Chicago right now." Isolde sipped her whiskey, felt the warmth spread through her chest. "That's wise, but Arthur, I need you to do something else. Anything. Name it. Make the termination public. Don't bury it in an internal memo. Issue a press release. Full transparency about the accounting fraud, the fake contracts, the damage to Henderson Global's reputation. Name him specifically." Silence. Henderson was calculating, weighing PR implications against legal exposure. That's aggressive. Our lawyers will advise against it. Your lawyers will advise you to protect the company at all costs. I'm advising you to protect your integrity. Dryden Hale spent 18 months lying to you, to his clients, to his colleagues. He made you complicit. The only way to draw a clear line between his actions and your company's values is to make it impossible for anyone to confuse the two. Another pause. Longer this time. You're right. God, you're right. I'll have communications draft something for Monday morning. Good. Now about Tokyo. Actually, Ms. Winters, I need to apologize. There is no Tokyo crisis. Isolde's hand tightened on the phone. Explain. Your chief of staff, Mr. Gray, called me this afternoon, asked if I'd be willing to make a call at a very specific time to a very specific location. He explained that you needed leverage for a personal matter. And given what you've done for Henderson Global over the past 3 years, I felt it was the least I could do. So Desmond had choreographed even that. The external speaker. The timing. Henderson's voice delivering Dryden's professional death sentence, while Isolde stood victorious and Dryden knelt in the dirt. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, Ms. Winters, for everything, including this advice about transparency. He paused. For what it's worth, whoever you were dealing with tonight, they didn't deserve you. The line went dead. Isolde set the phone down. Her personal phone buzzed. Desmond, a single line. D. Gray, it's done, rest. Then another 30 seconds later. D. Gray, you were magnificent. He never saw it coming. Isolde typed back, thank you for the Henderson call. The reply was immediate. You needed a closing argument. I provided one. Sleep, Isolde. Tomorrow the world moves on. So should you. She set the phone face down, closed her eyes, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind was racing through the last 2 hours on a loop, rewinding and replaying. Had she said the right things? Could she have been more devastating or less cruel? Would Dryden understand what he'd lost? The worst part was realizing she cared, still cared. After everything, some small part of her still wanted him to understand. But people like Dryden didn't grow. They just found new mirrors that reflected back what they wanted to see. Sarah materialized again, this time with a tablet. You're trending on Twitter, multiple hashtags. Someone filmed the whole thing. Isolde took the tablet. The video had already been edited into a 2-minute supercut, Dryden's mocking the jet landing, Thorne's arrival, the Henderson call her, reveal his collapse. Set to dramatic music. Over 4 million views in 90 minutes. She scrolled through comments. Some supportive, some vicious. Most just fascinated by the spectacle of someone's life detonating in real time. She handed the tablet back. Turn it off. It's important to know the narrative you've created. This isn't just viral, it's becoming mythological. By tomorrow morning, you'll have interview requests from every major publication. Your anonymity is over. I know. Isolde looked out the window at nothing. I revealed myself. Now I deal with the consequences. Sarah left her alone after that. The cabin lights dimmed. Isolde tried to sleep. Failed. Tried to work. Failed at that too. Just sat in expensive silence, drinking expensive whiskey, feeling small despite everything. Somewhere over the Pacific, her phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello, breathing. Then a voice she hadn't heard in 5 years, shaking, male, destroyed. It's me. Dryden. Of course it was Dryden. Isolde should have hung up. Instead, she listened. I don't know why I'm calling. I don't even know how I got this number. Someone at the reunion said they had it. His words tumbled over each other. I'm sitting in my car. I've been sitting here for 3 hours. I can't go home. Callista changed the locks. I can't go to work because I don't have work. My bank account is overdrawn. My credit cards are maxed. And I keep thinking, how did this happen? Isolde said nothing. Let the silence stretch. I keep replaying tonight. Keep watching the video everyone's posting. And the worst part is that I can't figure out where I went wrong. Like logically, I made good decisions. I positioned myself for advancement. I did everything the books tell you to do. And somehow I ended up here and you ended up... He couldn't finish the sentence. Why did you call Dryden? Her voice was flat, not angry, not sympathetic, exhausted. I don't know, maybe I thought you'd gloat. Maybe I thought you'd explain. A sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a so. Callista's gone. My job's gone. Everything I built just evaporated. And all I can think about is that night at Bellanotte. The way you looked at me when I said you were dead weight. I remember. You didn't fight back. You just sat there and took it. I thought that meant I was right, that you were too weak to argue. His breathing was ragged now, but you weren't weak. You were already planning this, weren't you? Isolde closed her eyes. No, I wasn't planning anything. I was just trying to survive the night. The revenge came later. After I realized that the girl you destroyed was someone I didn't want to be anyway. So you became this, became someone who could do to me what I did to you. No, Dryden. I became someone who didn't need to do anything to you. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped pretending not to see it. Silence. Long enough that Isolde thought he'd hung up. Then, I'm sorry. The words were so quiet she almost missed them. What? I'm sorry for that night, for how I treated you. For calling you an anchor when you were the only thing keeping me from drowning. His voice cracked. I was terrified. Terrified that I'd never be good enough, that I'd never matter. So I convinced myself that success meant looking successful. That if I could just get the right car and the right girlfriend and the right title, I'd finally feel like I wasn't faking it. Isolde opened her eyes, stared at her reflection in the window. This was the moment she'd imagined 1,000 times. Dryden broken, apologizing, admitting he'd been wrong. It just felt sad. You're only sorry because you got caught. Maybe, probably. A sound like palm hitting steering wheel. But I'm also sorry because you deserve better. You always deserve better. And I was too fucked up to see it. Something shifted in her chest. Not forgiveness, she wasn't sure forgiveness was even relevant, but something loosening. Some part of her that had been holding a defensive position for 5 years, finally standing down. Dryden, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself. The fraud, the lies. I just stopped pretending not to see it. I know. And I don't accept your apology. Not because I'm being cruel, but because accepting it would mean I needed it to move on. I don't. I already moved on. 5 years ago. This was just closing a loop. I understand. Do you? Because you still sound like someone looking for absolution. And I can't give you that. Nobody can. You have to live with who you've been and figure out who you want to become. That work, it's lonely. It's hard. And it won't matter to anyone but you. Silence. Then barely audible. How did you do it? How did you go from crying in a restaurant to this? Isolde looked around the cabin. The leather, the wood veneer, the champagne going flat. The whole elaborate theater of wealth that she'd built because someone had once made her feel worthless. I stopped waiting for someone to save me. Stopped believing that I needed validation from people who couldn't see me clearly. And I got angry. Not loud anger. The quiet kind. The kind that burns cold for years and builds something instead of destroying something. And now I'm tired, and I'm realizing that revenge doesn't fix anything. It just proves you survived. She could hear him breathing, trying to find words, failing. I hope you figure it out, Dryden. I really do. But I can't help you. This is where our story ends. She hung up, blocked the number. Sarah appeared as if summoned. That sounded difficult. It was necessary. Isolde rubbed her face. He needed to hear that I'd moved on. I needed to hear myself say it out loud. So what now? Isolde looked at her. Sarah wasn't asking about logistics or flight plans. She was asking about purpose, about what comes after you've won the war. You built your entire identity around fighting. Now I figure out who I am when I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. That's harder than building an empire. I know. The hours passed. Isolde dozed fitfully, waking every time the aircraft shifted or the engines changed pitch. When she finally gave up on sleep, she pulled out her laptop, opened a blank document, stared at the cursor blinking. What would she do if she'd never been insulted? If she'd never needed to prove anything? What would she build just because it made the world better? The answer came slowly. Then all at once. She'd been that girl once, 23 years old, working 3 jobs, sleeping in a storage closet. What had she needed that no one gave her a chance, just one chance? Someone to believe that she was more than her circumstances. Isolde started typing. Not a business plan, not a revenge fantasy. Just an idea taking shape. A training center. Free programs for women who wanted to break into STEM fields. Logistics. Supply chain management. Data science. All the skills she taught herself in storage closets, in cars, and cheap apartments. She worked for 3 hours. By the time she finished, the sky outside was beginning to lighten. Dawn somewhere over the Pacific. A new day, whether she was ready for it or not. Sarah brought coffee. Real coffee, not the airplane approximation. We're on approach to Phoenix. Isolde blinked against cabin lights that were too bright. Her neck hurt. Her mouth tasted like whiskey and regret. Phoenix, we were going to Tokyo. Captain Thorne rerouted while you were sleeping. He said you'd told him once that you wanted to see Arizona again. Thought maybe you'd like to see it in daylight. They landed at a small municipal airport outside Scottsdale, 8 a.m. local time. The desert looked different in morning light, less threatening. Just rock and sand and stubborn plants that had learned to survive impossible conditions. A car was waiting. Black sedan, driver in a suit who didn't ask questions. Isolde gave him an address she'd looked up on her phone during the descent. 20 minutes later, they stopped in front of a building that looked like it had been a warehouse once. Red brick, big windows, a sign above the door, Bella Notte, corporate offices. Isolde got out, stood on the sidewalk. Tried to remember what it felt like to be the girl who'd walked out of that restaurant 5 years ago with $40 and nowhere to sleep. She couldn't. That girl was too distant, like trying to remember someone else's childhood. The door opened. Giovanni stepped out. Older now, 70 instead of 65, but still moving with careful dignity. He saw her. Recognition flickered. Then something that might have been pride. Signorina Winters, I wondered if you would come. You saw the video? Everyone saw the video. My grandchildren sent it to me 6 times. He smiled. I told them I knew a girl who was very sad once, and now she is not sad anymore. I'm not sure that's true. Then what is true? Isolde looked at the building, the restaurant that had witnessed her lowest moment. I think the truth is that I spent 5 years building toward one moment, and now the moment's over, and I don't know what comes next. Giovanni gestured toward the door. Come, I will make you coffee, the good kind, and we will talk about what comes after revenge. His office was modest, family photos on the walls, a desk covered in paperwork that suggested running 3 restaurants was still hard work. Giovanni made espresso in a machine that looked like it had survived 3 wars. Strong. The kind of coffee that reminded you that some pleasures were simple, and that was enough. You want to know the secret? Giovanni settled into his chair. The secret is that revenge is dessert, tastes good for a moment, then is gone. But what you do after that is the meal. That is what nourishes or poisons you. What did you do after I made my money, after I proved to all the men who called me names that I was worth more than them? I felt empty, because the goal had been revenge. And revenge, once achieved, leaves a vacuum. He sipped his espresso. So I asked myself, what would I do if I had never been insulted? If I had never needed to prove anything? What would I build just because it made the world better? And I started a scholarship fund for immigrant children who want to go to culinary school. I started teaching even though I hated school when I was young. He smiled. I started building things that would outlive my anger. Isolde set her cup down. I want to do that, but I don't know how. Everything I've built alone. Then start by asking, who was Isolde 5 years ago? What did she need that no one gave her? The answer came immediately. A chance, just one chance, someone to believe that she was more than her circumstances. Then give that to someone else. Give it to 100 someone else's. Giovanni leaned forward. You have money now, power, the resources to create chances that didn't exist before, so create them, not to prove anything, just because you can. Isolde pulled out her laptop, showed him what she'd been working on during the flight. The training center, the programs, the vision of something bigger than revenge. Giovanni read in silence. When he finished, his eyes were wet. This is what matters. Not the jet, not the humiliation of that man. This. I want to name it after you. The Giovanni Moretti Center for Second Chances. He looked at her, really looked. Seeing past the expensive suit in the billions of dollars to the girl who'd once needed $20 and a kind word. You honor me, signorina, but you must promise me something. Anything. You must promise that you will do this for the right reasons. Not to feel better about the revenge, not to balance some cosmic ledger, but because you remember what it felt like to need a chance. And you cannot bear the thought of someone else feeling that way when you have the power to change it. Isolde thought about that, about the girl in the storage closet, the girl sleeping in her car, the girl who'd solved an impossible problem on Reddit because she had nothing left to lose. I promise. They talked for another hour, about specifics, about possibilities. By the time Isolde left, the plan was real enough to feel possible. The driver took her to one more location, an address Desmond had sent while she was with Giovanni, a building in Chicago's industrial district. Former logistics warehouse. High ceilings. Good bones. Close to public transit. Isolde stood in the parking lot looking at the structure. It was perfect. Space for classrooms and computer labs in a neighborhood that needed investment. She made 3 phone calls. First to Desmond, I need you to set up a foundation, nonprofit, education-focused. Fund it with $500 million to start. What are we calling it? The Giovanni Moretti Center for Second Chances. Understood. I'll have papers drafted by end of week. Second to her real estate attorney. That Chicago warehouse we purchased last quarter. Don't flip it. We're converting it. I'll send specs. Third to Captain Thorne. Change of plans. We're not going to Tokyo. File a flight plan for London. I'm going home. She stood there for a few more minutes, looking at the building that would become something better than revenge, something that would matter when she was gone. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, a law firm she didn't recognize, regarding Hale Logistics acquisition inquiry. Our client wishes to discuss sale of remaining assets. Please contact at your earliest convenience. Someone was trying to sell her Dryden's company, the company that bore his name, already being carved up for parts. She could buy it, should buy it from a business perspective. The assets were undervalued. The client list was decent. She could absorb the useful pieces, delete Dryden's legacy entirely. She deleted the message. Some victories weren't worth winning. The flight to London took 8 hours. Isolde spent them working, drafting mission statements, sketching organizational structures, calculating budgets for something that didn't exist yet but would, something that mattered. Somewhere over the Atlantic, she realized her hands had stopped shaking. The hollow feeling in her chest had been replaced by something else. Not happiness, not peace, but purpose, direction. The sense that she was finally moving towards something instead of away from something. When they landed at a private airfield outside London, the sun was setting, golden light streaming through clouds, the city sprawling below like a promise. Desmond was waiting in the car. He didn't ask about Arizona or Dryden or the viral video, just handed her a tablet. Foundation paperwork, ready for your signature. And the Chicago property is clear for conversion. Architects can start as soon as you approve the plans. Isolde scrolled through the documents. Everything was there. Legal, organized, real. The press is going insane, Desmond continued. Interview requests from everyone. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes wants you for their season premiere. Your anonymity is officially over. I know. And I'll do select interviews. Controlled, strategic, on my terms. She looked at him. But the story isn't about revenge. It's about what comes after. The center, the mission, giving chances to people who need them. Desmond smiled, actually smiled, which was rare. That's the right play. Turn the narrative from billionaire destroys ex-boyfriend to philanthropist builds empire to help others. Much better optics. It's not about optics, it's about actually doing something that matters. Even better. They drove to her penthouse in silence. London traffic was its usual nightmare, but Isolde barely noticed. She was too busy thinking about the future, about the women who would walk into that Chicago warehouse with nothing but potential, about giving them what Giovanni had given her: belief, resources, a chance. The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it, minimalist, expensive, empty in the way that places are empty when they're just where you sleep between flights. She'd bought it because successful people own property in London, but she'd never made it home. Desmond handed her a final folder as he left. One more thing. Giovanni called while you were in the air. Asked me to give you this. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in careful script. Cara Isolde, you asked me once how I knew when I had truly moved past my anger. I will tell you now. It was the day I woke up and my first thought was not about the men who had wronged me. It was about the students I would teach that afternoon, the meal I would cook, the life I was living, not the life I had escaped. Revenge ends when you stop needing to remind yourself that you won. You have won, Signorina. Now go live. Con affetto. Giovanni Isolde read it twice, folded it carefully, put it in her wallet next to the torn photograph from 5 years ago, the picture of her in Dryden that she'd kept as a reminder. She looked at both pieces of paper, evidence of who she'd been and who she was becoming. Then she threw the photograph away, kept Giovanni's letter. She walked to the window, looked out at London stretching toward the horizon. Millions of people living millions of stories, some of them revenge stories, some of them redemption stories, most of them just survival stories dressed up as something more important. Isolde Winters at 28 had everything she'd wanted at 23. Money, power, proof that the people who dismissed her had been catastrophically wrong. And now finally she understood what Giovanni had been trying to tell her. The opposite of revenge wasn't forgiveness. It was indifference. It was building something that had nothing to do with the people who'd hurt you. Something that mattered when the anger finally burned out and you were left with just yourself and the question of who you wanted to be. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes, started a new document. Giovanni Moretti Center. Statement: we believe that everyone deserves a second chance, not because they have earned it through suffering, not because they've proven themselves worthy, but because potential should never be limited by circumstance. We exist to provide resources, education, and opportunity to women who have been told they are not enough, who have been called anchors when they are actually foundations. Who needs someone to believe in them while they learn to believe in themselves? This is not charity. This is investment in the future we want to see. She typed for an hour. When she finished, she sent it to Desmond with a single instruction: make this real. Then she poured herself a glass of water, stood at the window, watched London's lights come on as darkness fell. Her phone buzzed one more time. A message from Captain Thorne. C. Thorne, ma'am, jet is fueled and ready whenever you need it. Where's next? Isolde looked at the message, at the question that had defined her life for 5 years. Where's next? Always running, always moving, always chasing the next deal, the next success, the next proof that she mattered. She typed back, nowhere. I'm staying home. I'll let you know when I need you. His response was immediate, understood. Rest well, ma'am. Isolde set the phone down, looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back was a stranger. Not the girl who'd cried in a restaurant. Not the ghost who'd built an empire from rage. Someone new. Someone still being invented. She raised her water glass to the reflection. A toast to herself, to the girl she'd been, to the woman she'd become, to whoever she'd be tomorrow. Here's to second chances, she whispered to the empty room. Even the ones we give ourselves. Outside, London hummed with life. Inside, Isolde Winters was finally mercifully, beautifully still. The revenge was over. The real work was just beginning. And for the first time in 5 years, she was ready.